In latest development from the Ladakh front, an Indian Army colonel who was the commanding officer of an infantry battalion and 2 Army soldiers have been martyred during a clash with the Chinese troops at one of the standoff points in the Galwan Valley. According to journalist Shiv Arur, the 3 Indian Army soldiers were martyred during the ongoing clash between India and China and the troops near the line of actual control at areas around the Galwan Valley at Ladakh. Arur shared an official statement by the Indian Army which mentioned that during the de-escalation process between the 2 sides in the Galwan Valley, a violent face-off took place between the 2 sides on Monday night at the spot, leading to casualties. During the clash-off, 3 Indian soldiers, including a colonel-rank army officer, were martyred. The Indian Army and PLA officials are now present at the spot due to defuse the tensions between the 2 sides, the Indian Army said. The tension between India and China has escalated since, and reports have emerged that China has deployed excessive troops and set up temporary tents along the Galwan River in Ladakh after a face-off near Pangong Tso on May 5th to 6th. It is also believed that Chinese troops have taken up positions along the Pangong Tso Lake and are also carrying out aggressive patrols with motorboats to intimidate Indian forces in the region. Reportedly, Chinese troops have damaged some temporary structures put up in the finger area near Pangong Tso Lake. The face-offs, which started as little as a skirmish initiated by the Chinese troops, later took a serious turn after the Chinese side brought in troops and heavy equipment from a military exercise. The Galwan standoff comes at a backdrop of a recent incident where troops of both India and China were involved in 2 face-offs in a span of a week near the eastern Ladakh and near Nakula Pass in the Sikkim sector along the contentious border between the 2 countries. In their first incident, the Chinese army personnel had clashed with Indian forces along the northern bank of the Pangong Lake in eastern Ladakh on May 5th. The face-off ended the next morning following dialogue between the 2 sides. A number of soldiers on both sides had sustained minor injuries. Just days before, in another incident, nearly 150 Indian and Chinese personnel had engaged in a face-off near Nakula Pass in the Sikkim sector of the Sino-India border, in which at least 10 soldiers sustained injuries. Amidst the simmering tensions along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh following violent clashes between the Indian and Chinese troops, an all-party meet was cancelled by Prime Minister Modi. To discuss the tense situation in Ladakh, Prime Minister Modi on Friday issued a stern message to neighboring China saying that India wants peace and friendship, but it won't compromise on its sovereignty. Prime Minister Modi also asserted that there has been no intrusion by the Chinese soldiers in the Indian territory. He said, "No one entered the Indian territory, nor were Indian posts taken over." Prime Minister Narendra Modi said in an all-party meeting this evening to discuss the Ladakh clash, in which 20 Indian soldiers were killed. 20 Jawans did die, he said, listen to those who had cast their evil eyes on Bharat Mata, India, Prime Minister Modi said. Modi also assured that the Indian Armed Forces, Navy, Army, and Air Force are all prepared and competent to protect the country. He said, "I am also assuring you that our army is leaving no stone unturned to protect the country. Deployment, action, counteraction, our Army, Navy, and Air Force are doing whatever they have to protect the country," Prime Minister Modi said. While claiming that China has been conveyed about India's stand on the issue in no uncertain terms, Prime Minister Modi said that the armed forces have been given full freedom to take any action that seems to be necessary, that is deemed necessary. Speaking about India's readiness in protecting its territorial integrity, Prime Minister Modi said that India has prioritized infrastructural development in border areas in the last few years for securing its borders. He also emphasized that the Indian armed forces are today powered with jet fighters, modern helicopters, and missile defense systems. Prime Minister Modi extolled about the Indian Army's augmented capabilities of patrolling areas which were earlier difficult to monitor. He said our soldiers are now able to monitor and patrol areas which were earlier not kept on the watch. Till now, no one was questioned, but today our soldiers intercept and stop the interlopers, he said. In a covert message hinted at China, the Prime Minister said that India has never cowed down to intimidation and will continue to work towards achieving its goal. He said, be it trade, interconnectivity, counterterrorism, India has never buckled under external pressure. Whatever is essential for national security and for strengthening the infrastructure in border areas will continue at the same pace, Prime Minister Modi said. At least 20 Indian soldiers, including commander officer, had attained martyrdom in the violent clashes with the Chinese troopers in the Galwan Valley, the Indian Army said on Tuesday. The army had initially claimed that 3 soldiers, including one commanding officer, were killed in the skirmishes, but later in the evening it revised the figure to 20, saying 17 others had succumbed to their injuries due to the prolonged exposure to sub-zero temperatures. Though Beijing remained reticent on the number of casualties suffered by it, the Indian government said that the Chinese side endured heavy casualties, with close to 43 to 45 PLA soldiers that have been seriously injured or killed in the clashes. Now, a US intel report has stated that at least 35 Chinese soldiers have perished in the brawl at the Galwan Valley. The killing of the Indian soldiers marks the Indian Army's worst losses since the Kargil War in 1999 and signifies the most intense military combat between China and India since 1967, when about 80 Indian soldiers and at least 300 Chinese PLA troops were killed in the course of the savage skirmishes that broke out near the Nathula and Cholo passes, the strategic gateway to the crucial Chumbi Valley. So, India will need to be tough and show strength to its enemies, and especially to its own citizens. India, as we know it, has shown frailty and chosen peace at the wrong time when the enemy was already at the doorstep. In 1947, Kashmir chose to accede to India. At that time, Pakistan had already invaded, and India fought all the way to now what is known as the line of control, since Nehru at the time tried to wear the white hat and chose to consult the United Nations when the enemy was already inside Indian territory. India had surrendered its own territory to Pakistan under a ceasefire. This would come to bite India for the next 100 years, as Pakistan still uses asymmetric warfare against Indian-administered Kashmir. During Kargil, India did not chase the enemy back to its home when they withdrew from Kargil under international pressure, because we thought it would be an opportunity for the world to see the peace and goodness in us when we should have made them regret. Before 1962, the 62 War, in which China won, loopholes in intel in the war led to the creation of RAW. That same RAW prevented from doing whatever it was necessary to make sure that Nepal's Communist Party does not fall for the Chinese wooing to have Nepal bite into its debt trap. Although India has shown tremendous strength in the 1971 India-Pakistan War, leading to the creation of an independent Bangladesh, it is time for India to make a name for itself as a strong, independent country that is protective of its sovereignty. That looks at India's enemy directly in the eye. Peace cannot be the attitude of choice at the wrong time. Peace and war should be a choice given to nations through their attitude and relations with India. If an enemy is asking for trouble, showing the wrong response will bring us trouble. This has been our historic mistake with Pakistan, with their robust anti-India network active inside of India. India did not take strong actions against those who conspire with the enemy. So both internally and externally, India must show strength for the entire nation's morale, and so that every Indian, regardless of creed, can feel proud that they belong to a strong nation. And Modi has shown just that. For the first time since 1962, India has shown that it has changed, that Ladakh is an Indian territory and China cannot bully and treat its neighbors like trash. India has killed 43 Chinese troops, including a senior ranking member of the PLA. The Chinese PLA bludgeoned 20 of India's own unarmed troops to death. This situation is tense, yet India did the right thing by standing up to the enemy and retaliating as necessary. Yet, what is more important is that India needs to understand that relations with China will have to be downgraded for them to respect India. India cannot pretend that nothing happened after the flashpoint de-escalates. India will need to be aggressive to China and must ban Chinese investments in India for a very long time. This can be a step in the right direction for China free independence in India. If India aims to fulfill its dreams and potential as either the largest or second largest economy in the world, it must first become independent of Chinese investments and goods. The downgrading of Indian and Chinese relations will also drive Indians to buy Indian products and services, as nationalism will continue to increase in the coming years. To meet consumer demand, quality and quantity will improve in supply from Indian brands. As the quality increases, India's own exports will also increase, greatly boosting the economy and the GDP. This can be a new beginning for India, while as if India does choose to restore relations with China, it will be a long time before we wake up to the Chinese model of the three warfare, as mentioned in the Communist Party of China's three warfare doctrine, which in summary pertains to strangling you with your own systems. This is a quote. So, economically, psychologically, socially, and diplomatically, these three doctrine warfare is something that China implements. China only believes in being number one and not cooperating and letting others live in peace. They've shown this with what they did with Tibet, what they're doing with the Uyghurs. Their behavior is replicated in the South China Sea, using Tibet to control the water flow into South and Southeast Asia, blocking Japan's ticket to a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council, arming terrorist Pakistan with nukes and MIRVs. China should be looked at as a permanent threat to the stability of the world, especially in the region, and India must never forget its destiny to become independent in order to ascend to a leadership role in the world and to give China a run for its money militarily and in terms of soft power. For more videos, please subscribe to get the latest updates and hit like if you like this video. Jai Bharat.